Hi, I'm Jessica, and when I'm not drinking all the coffee, watching Razorback sports, or hanging out with my family of boys, it's my passion to help elementary music teachers just like you find your unique teaching style. My goal with this podcast is to share helpful tips, strategies, and to give you the motivation you need to gain momentum in your teaching so you can continue being the music teacher rock star you already are. Today, you are in for a treat, let me tell you. This interview is with Erin Elliott, who is an amazing elementary music teacher who has taken all 3 levels of Orff and is implementing Orff into her classroom every single day. She gives so many awesome words of wisdom and how to start using Orff-Schulwerk, what to do if you don't have very many instruments, and also a little bit about how to apply other teaching methods into your classroom as well. You are going to learn so much in the course of this interview about using Orff, and if you've always kind of been curious about it or how to start implementing it into your classroom, then this is definitely the episode to listen to. Now, if you would like to be on the podcast, simply head to thedomesticmusician.com and click on the podcast tab, and I would love to interview you on this podcast as well. If you're an elementary music teacher and you have something to share with other elementary music teachers, then I would love to have you on the podcast, so go check it out. All right, so let's dive right in with today's episode with Erin Elliott.
Okay, so like I said in the podcast intro, this is Erin, and she is in her 5th year of teaching elementary music, but she's been teaching 8 years total. And I'm just so excited to hear from her today about her way of teaching Orff and how she got started with teaching Orff and what she enjoys about it and why she feels like it really helps her in her teaching. So if you've been curious about Orff-Schulwerk, this is definitely the episode to listen to. So with all that said, Erin, I would love for you to introduce yourself even more than what I already said in the intro, and we'll get started.
So I teach K-5 elementary music in a district in northern Indiana called Penn Harris Madison School Corporation. I'm at 2 different schools. I do K-5 at one school and just kindergarten at a second school. It's a larger school where they have a full-time teacher who does 1st through 5th grade. So I just do the kindergarten there. So it's nice seeing all the grade levels, though I do a lot of kindergarten as well. So this is my fifth year in the district teaching elementary, my 4th year in this specific position.
Awesome. That is so cool. Wow. So teaching kindergarten music is a whole, don't you feel like it's like a whole nother world in itself?
It's very much like herding cats the first semester. Or with some classes, still to this day, it's like herding cats.
Yeah. And the thing about kindergarten I remember is when they come in for back to school night, and you're just like, please don't touch the instruments. It never fails. And then the parents are standing there smiling at you, and you're smiling back, and in your head, you're thinking, please get your kid off this stuff. But you're like, welcome to music class. I know. Oh my goodness. So, okay. So I'm going to start this interview by asking you, what is your favorite thing about teaching music?
I love seeing the creativity that can come from children. Kids are naturally creative, but so often we've created this testing culture that kids think they have to just have one right answer and, what box do I click? And they're just waiting for the teacher to tell us the answer. And I really like to push kids out of their comfort zone and out of that box. And when children are comfortable with that, it's amazing to see what they can create and when you give them the freedom to explore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I do love that because a lot of times music classrooms are so structured, and it depends on the personality of the teacher, which we're going to dive into a little bit more. But I feel like kids in music class aren't meant to sit still, and giving them creativity to explore is so great. I love that you said that. And so, okay, so today we're going to talk about Orff-Schulwerk. And so I just kind of want to ask you, how did you find out about this teaching approach, and what experience do you have teaching with it?
Well, I think like all undergrad music ed majors, you talk about it in your methods course, but whether you get to experience it or not is another story. So like I know for me personally, I didn't have a specific elementary methods class. It was just a methods class, K-12. And I had a secondary teacher for a professor. So we talked about Orff and Kodály and Dalcroze and Gordon. but it was really limited to like just a week or two of discussion. So I remember we opened up the cabinets to the xylophones. We said we use those in Orff, but that's about all we did. And I think for most of those approaches, like they're so experiential that if you don't personally experience or see it in action and like practice applying it, it doesn't really make sense. So it was all theoretical for me. So my first 3 years of teaching, I was actually teaching high school band and choir and guitar and piano, instrumental ensemble, and musical theater. Like I was a one-woman show at a Catholic high school. So like I really just was not a part of that world. So it wasn't until my husband and we moved on to Louisville, Kentucky for grad school. He was a graduate assistant with the marching band back when the football team and basketball team were both really good. And not right now as much. And I worked with a music ed professor named Rob Amshin, who is a really famous Orff clinician and teacher. And I was his graduate teaching assistant. And so I worked in his elementary methods class, in his intro to music ed class. And then I got to see it in action. And it was just this light bulb that went off. I was like, oh, that's Orff. Okay, I get it. So it wasn't until after grad school that I did my first level. And over the course of 4 summers, I did my 3 levels of Orff. And I did that at the University of Cincinnati, SCCM. They got a lovely program. I studied with some phenomenal people there.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so your experience in elementary music methods was kind of similar to mine, where I have like a story of the professor who taught elementary music methods retired. And so in the process of them trying to find someone new, they had our secondary methods teacher, one of the secondary methods teachers, teach us kind of like at the end of each lesson, okay, well, we need to cover some things about elementary music methods real quick. And you kind of just shoved it in there because they were in the process. And then of course the next semester they hired someone, but I was already moved on to the next courses, anyways. And so I had the same experience. I mean, I knew about all the different teaching methods, and I knew like I really liked Orff, but I had never, except for some practicums. And even when I was student teaching, that's a whole nother ball game, but she didn't have any instruments really at all. The kids just kind of sat in desks and didn't really, they just kind of read from books, but so it wasn't until I took some trainings, even before my first level, that, like you said, I experienced Orff and really realized, oh, I didn't really understand. It's different from learning about it in a book or just hearing someone talk about it than experiencing it. I think that's a great point. And so I wanted to ask you, well, let's go ahead and hop into this, and I'm going to ask you something else. So I said, I feel like a lot of teachers, if they're not aware of really what Orff is, like, if they're just like we were and they're just learning about it, but haven't really experienced it yet, it's not just about the instruments, is it?
No, absolutely not. So I'm really blessed to have a good set of Orff xylophones. Usually kids have to be they're either paired up with one other student or they're on an instrument by themselves. So I'm really blessed to have a large set of instruments, and I do a lot of recorders in my upper elementary grades as well. But even though Orff designed the xylophones to be used in the classroom, and he was the one who brought recorders into the elementary curriculum, it's much more about the process than the instruments. So like, in that process is all about exploration and imitation before you ever label anything. And then once you do label a concept, then there's improvisation and creating. And you can do that with instruments or without instruments. For example, my 3rd graders right now are working on question and answer. We're not ready to put that on xylophones at all and worry about melodic concepts with question and answer. So we're just doing it on body percussion right now, literally just with claps in one level. And eventually we'll branch out into xylophones or recorders for question and answer, but we're not ready for that by any means yet.
That's good. So if an elementary music teacher listening to this doesn't have very many instruments or none at all, which was exactly how I started. So even when I took Orff level 1, and when I took Orff level 1, I thought, well, this is great, but I don't have any instruments. And I kind of left feeling a little discouraged, and I knew my goal was to get instruments, you know, and I eventually got to that place with some, you know, stipends and things. But then I realized it isn't all about instruments, and it is, I had the kids moving. We did a lot of body percussion and just experiencing music. So would you encourage, if a teacher's listening to this and they don't have any instruments, is that what you encourage them to do when they're getting started?
For sure, definitely. And, you know, you can start working up with just rhythm sticks and, you know, some smaller non-pitch percussion. That's what I do for kindergarten. They don't get onto any of the xylophones until, you know, end of fall for the glockenspiels, or not until the spring for my other xylophones, really.
Yeah.
So we just stick with non-pitch percussion. We do a lot of movement, you know, both creative movement and folk dancing, and improvisation as well. So absolutely, you don't have to have a large set of instruments. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
There are ways to get instruments. I just finished writing a grant last week to hopefully get another bass xylophone and get our first bass metallophone. But you can definitely be an Orff teacher and not have xylophones in your classroom.
Yeah. And I definitely think it's something, like I said, to build up to. It's okay if you don't have all that right away. And, you know, like you said, there's grants, there's stipends. Sometimes the district gives you money, and even your budget, even if it's not very much, you can even just getting one instrument a year. Sometimes build the program over time, and that's okay. So this is kind of a big question, but I would just love for you to give us any points on how the Orff approach has changed the way you teach.
Sure. So it really makes me kind of work backwards. You know, I know what concepts I want to cover in each grade level, but instead of labeling, okay, today we're going to talk about quarter notes, you know, I really work backwards. So before, like, for example, my first graders, before we ever learn about quarter notes and eighth notes, ta, tt, whatever you want to call them, we have sung them throughout kindergarten and first grade. We've clapped them. I have movement games that we do, like they travel in cars, and I'm playing either quarter notes or eighth notes on a tubano, and they have to drive their cars to the tempo that I'm playing. So they're feeling it and moving to it and using them way before we ever label them. And so when we do label them and they see those symbols and they hear, you know, what they're actually called, it just clicks because it's been ingrained in them for the past year and a half. So it kind of makes me think backwards in my curriculum. You know, here's where I want to be. How do I get there now? And I think Orff just encourages me to find more opportunities for student projects and collaboration. Like I said earlier, students are naturally creative when you give them the freedom and the safe space to do so. And so the more opportunities we have to give them creative and musical decisions, instead of just like, oh, what's the one right answer? It really allows kids to open up and really just blossom.
Yeah, that's great. No, experiencing music, not just learning it. I think that's so important. I really do. Okay, so what would you say to someone who doesn't know where to find opportunities to take Orff training?
Well, if you don't know anything about the Orff-Schulwerk at all, the AOSA website is a great resource. They have some good videos. They have more resources if you are a member, but that's aosa.org. You can also look to see where your closest chapter is as well. They have a list of all the local and state chapters. And from there, you can go to your closest chapter's website and see when their workshops are. Now, you have to pay to be a member, but it's well worth it. It's definitely well worth it. And on the AOSA website, you can also look up the teacher education courses. So there are 3 levels offered with Orff-Schulwerk. They are almost always offered in the summer. They are 2-week-long intensive courses. And by intense, I mean about 8:30 to 4:30 during Monday through Friday, and then it could be between 1 and 3 hours of homework at night. So it definitely takes up your entire 2 weeks, but it's so worth it just to be fully immersed in that. And other ways to kind of get ideas about Orff-Schulwerk, there are some good YouTube channels. If you go to Rob Amchin's channel, he's got hundreds of videos of him teaching different songs and different activities to his college students, or for when he's doing his Orff levels. But it's him going through that process. Or there's some good Facebook pages and blogs to read. Like, I love listening to David Rouse, Make Music Moments Matter, something like that. So he's got all these videos, and I'll just play a video and just listen to it while I'm cleaning my room or doing something like that. And they're just really good for inspiration. So there's a lot of different ways you can learn about it. And if the National Convention is ever in your city or nearby, by far, hands down, the best elementary music conference that you can attend. This past year it was in Cincinnati, so I definitely went. Next year I probably won't be able to go because it's going to be in Salt Lake City. But hopefully the year after that, I'll be able to go back.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool that they came to you this year, huh?
Well, I live in Northern India, so it's still it's like a 4-hour drive, but it was well worth it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I feel like, if there's professional development that, especially the national conference, my goodness, that you can go to, it's totally worth it. So also I wanted to mention too, that their local school district, if they're at a public school, and even at private school, there's opportunities to find local workshops as well, right?
It depends on the school district. Our district does not offer specific music workshops at all. We've never had like a professional development specific to music teachers, but we're kind of a mid-sized school district. I think we're about 9,000 or 10,000 students total. So it kind of varies by the district, but ours does not provide anything specific in regards to music, at least for the elementary teachers.
Yeah. Okay. So those opportunities may or may not be there, but like she said, there's so many opportunities online, and look at taking an Orff level. And a lot of times, I mean, they're driving distance from where you are. And even if they're not, it's totally worth it and I feel like investing in yourself, to become the teacher you want to be is well worth it.
Yeah. Good teachers are always good students.
Oh, that's great. And always willing to learn new things too. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what would you say to someone whose school district is heavy in another teaching method, but they want to teach the way with their unique teaching style, and maybe kind of feel like, I don't know how to word this, like they like their from learning about the different teaching methods, they feel like they want to maybe do Orff, and maybe they're in a very Kadai centered district. You kind of feel like the black sheep sometimes. So how would you encourage that teacher that it's okay to be them?
Yeah, the nice thing about these approaches to elementary music is that they're not mutually exclusive. With Orff and Kadai and Dalcroze, like the main original three, I guess, if you want to call them that, they all were from different countries, and all three guys had different backgrounds, but they all knew each other. Dalcroze even bought a set of his own Orff xylophones to use in his classroom. So they don't have to be mutually exclusive. One of my best mentors had taken all 3 levels of Orff and both levels of Gordon, and I had the wonderful opportunity to observe her and see how she seamlessly integrated both Orff and Gordon and music learning theory into the classroom. And it was amazing to see. So, if you are in a district that heavily leans towards one way, and you're like, but I really want to try something else, go for it. It's not one or the other. There are a lot of commonalities. I think each approach kind of has its own focus.
Yeah.
Dalcroze is very much about movement, and Kadai is very much about solfege and Kerwin, and Orff, we can think of the creative movement, or we can think of the xylophones or recorders, but it still encompasses everything. They just have different focuses. So don't be afraid to go out and look at other trainings as well. In our district, our teachers have a wide background of experiences in trainings. I think there's one other teacher who has gone through some of her Orff levels. There's a couple teachers who use a lot of fire robin in their teaching. Some that just have a really strong musical theater background, and so their classes are, you can see that reflected in their classes. So yeah, just go off and find your own thing. Look for the commonalities.
I love how you say that there are commonalities between them, because I feel like a lot of times I'm just going to, I just feel this way. I feel like a lot of times it's either you're only Kodály, only Orff, or only one of the other ones. Yeah. And I feel like it's okay to pull from different methods. And like For you sure. said, a lot of times there's commonalities between them, and there's things that you can pull from all these different approaches that you can use, even if your main niche is one or the other.
Right. And they really can complement each other. I remember the first time I went to the National Orff Conference, they had one of the top Dalcroze clinicians in the country there presenting
at
the National Orff Conference. And I attended, and it was amazing because I'd never seen or experienced Dalcroze in action. And so, I mean, if they are welcoming a Dalcroze clinician at the Orff conference, I mean, it can just really complement each other.
That's good. So to tie on to that, do you feel it's important for music teachers to also use their unique teaching style and personality in their classroom?
For sure. I mean, if you want to be happy in what you do, like, you need to be yourself. Just like some teachers are naturally more extroverted, some are more naturally introverted. Like, you have to be yourself when you teach. So some people may find that, like, Orff is too kind of loosey-goosey for them, and they may like the structure and organization of Kodály. Like, for me, like, when I was learning about the different approaches in undergrad, Kodály, like, it made the most sense to me because it was the most concrete. But, everyone's going to have their own thing that they gravitate towards. And I still encourage people to check out Orff-Schulwerk and, expand their horizons and boundaries, but you have to be true to who you are and find your niche, wherever that may be.
Mm-hmm. I know. So like I mentioned, this is our second time to record. So I just remember you yesterday telling me a story about your student teaching experience and how, what did you learn? And we talked a little bit about what you learned, what to do by student teaching, but also in observing other teachers, but you learn, hey, I kind of want to do things differently. So what was your experience like with that?
I love my cooperating teacher. She was so nice. I still have some of the observation sheets full of smiley faces and hearts. Like, she was a true elementary educator at heart. But it was very much, we're going to sit in our chairs and we're going to open up our textbook to this. And frankly, that's kind of how my elementary experience was as well. So, that's kind of what I knew. And I was actually, like, because I was kind of interested in Kodály at the time, because to me that was the most concrete. So I actually did, I didn't mention this yesterday, but I actually did do some research on Kodály. We found an old musty book in the basement of one of our schools, and I got a couple of resources when I was at the OMEA conference that year, and I started implementing it in some of the younger grades. And so I got to see some of it in action, and it was all completely new to her. And it was really nice that she was open to letting me try new and different things. But I teach so incredibly different from how I ever student taught. Our chairs are stacked in a corner of the room. I really only get them out for my after school choir, or if I have a student with a broken foot or something like that, like, I don't get them out. My textbooks are in storage. I use the textbooks for, like, repertoire, but I'm not going to get out and keep 6th grade levels worth of textbooks in my classroom. I want that space for movement and instruments and everything else that we do in class.
Yeah.
Especially with technology these days.
Oh, totally. Music education has changed so much. And so I feel like a lot of these teachers I'm sure, obviously, if they're a cooperating teacher, they're a little bit older. I'm not meaning every cooperating teacher is not older. I've had student teachers.
I'll be a cooperating teacher next year.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I had a cooperating teacher my second year teaching, and I was like, are you sure? I'm not sure if they need to be in here watching me, but anyways. But no, my student teaching experience was very similar. She was great. She even won, not student teacher of the year. Hello. She won teacher of the year that year I was there.
Awesome.
And she was more, which is every teacher, I want to encourage you, if you're listening to this, do you, okay? You can teach the way you feel comfortable teaching. This is not us, saying anything's wrong with their teaching style.
Mm-hmm.
It's just saying, if you do student teaching, she was very performance based, put on this big patriotic program every year, which was amazing. And the community loved it. But there were desks in her room, which I didn't get why that was in the music room. But I mean, it's okay. It's her classroom, and that's what works for her. And so if you're experiencing that and you're like, okay, well, any teacher you observe, you're doing practicums all through college, and any teacher or even while you're teaching, I, observe several different teachers. Even at workshops, you'll go in classrooms and kind of look around, be like, oh, this is cool. You kind of just pick things up as you go. So don't be overwhelmed right away if you feel like my classroom doesn't look like theirs, or am I supposed to do it just like this teacher does, or whatever. If this is your first year teaching, or even second or third, and you feel like you still can't find your bearings, it takes a while, right? To figure it out as you go.
Absolutely. Every year there are different things that I pick up. Either I just discover them on my own, or I, read something on a Facebook page. I'm like, oh, I should try that this year. Mm-hmm. I'm like, why didn't I think of that earlier? Yeah. So every year you kind of refine and kind of redefine who you are as a teacher and your processes. It definitely takes time. It definitely takes time.
Yeah. So I know you are about to have a baby. And so the teacher that's coming in to do the long-term subbing, he has a completely different teaching style than you as well, right? And that's okay.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. So I met with him a couple of days ago, and he's finishing up student teaching right now. So hopefully I don't go early, because he can't start until after Easter.
Oh no.
Cross fingers. But his experience with elementary methods was very much based in Gordon and music learning theory. And he was a little apprehensive at first, looking at the Orff resources. The person that he student taught with for elementary methods had an Orff background as well, but they didn't use the xylophones that much. Mm-hmm. But he asked, is it okay if I include some, Gordon and music learning theory aspects into my teaching? I'm like, heck yeah, go for it. Yeah. Because I have seen it in action. It's something that I don't know or understand as well, but I've seen the benefits of it. And I'm really curious to see how my students are going to catch on to it, and see how it's going to help some of my students learn and grow in ways that I haven't been able to do myself.
That's great. Okay, so let's talk real quick about classroom management with Orff instruments. Any strategies you have for classroom management when it comes to that?
A lot.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, both of my schools are Title I schools. There's a lot of kids who move in throughout the year and move out, or start. Every year there's at least 2 or 3 new students in every grade level. Or in 5th grade this year, I think we had 8 or 9 new students in between our two sections of 5th grade. So I always have to reinforce and go through all the routines and classroom management skills every year. So every room is going to be set up differently. In my main room, my room is a big rectangle, so I have my xylophones in 3 rows onto the side. Mm-hmm. And my students, they know how they walk around the instruments. They know how they enter the space. They always go in one side and they exit the same side. And so we practice that. I demonstrate it throughout the year, especially when we have new people. So it's an expectation that kids know. And if they don't follow that, kids are going to call them out on that.
Yeah.
And with kindergarten, I don't put them on xylophones right away. They're not ready for it. Behavior-wise, they're not ready for it, just looking at their fine and gross motor skills. So we do a lot of non-pitch percussion first. And I always tell the younger kids, I will always teach you how to play instruments correctly, and I will always teach you how to take care of them. So every instrument in my classroom has a sleep, rest, and ready position. Sleep, the instrument is on the floor, our hands are in our lap, and they have to practice that self-control. If they can't demonstrate self-control of keeping instruments on the floor and out of their hands, they're not ready for mallets in their hands unless you want an absolute headache by the end of class.
Yeah.
And then rest, they have the instrument and or the mallet in their hands, on their legs, but when I rest, I'm not snoring, I'm not making noise. So your instruments are still really quiet. And then ready, your instrument is up, ready to play. You're looking at the teacher, waiting for that cue. And then when they get, when the kindergartners get glockenspiels for the first time, it's the same thing. Mallets, when they're in sleep position, they're laying on top of the xylophone. When they are in rest position, the mallets are in their hands, but usually just kind of up on their knees or up on their shoulders. And then ready position, the mallets are in, over the xylophone, ready to play, but I'm looking at the teacher waiting for directions. So it's just this natural transition to a more complicated instrument. And to me, that helps the students a lot. And I almost always have a pair of mallets in my hands, or if I don't, I'm still doing the same thing with my hands. So if they miss the direction, all they have to do is look at me and follow what I'm doing.
That's good. Which
always helps, because the kids know that if you're not listening to the rules, you will lose your mallets or you will lose your instrument.
Yeah,
that's just an expectation that you have to reinforce. Yeah. But that helps a lot as well. And there's other things that I do, like with the older kids, if we're working on an arrangement for like a folk song, or if you're working on a composition project where they're using the xylophones a lot, I'll keep them on the same instruments for a couple days in a row. So that first day, I randomly pair them up. Kids have numbers, and I just call numbers. And I'm like, okay, 18 and 24, you're going to go to this bass xylophone. Okay, 2 and 19, you're going to go to this xylophone. And then the next day, I can just say, okay, back row, quietly walk to your instrument. The middle row, quietly walk to your instrument, and whatnot. So they even know, like, if a fire alarm were to go off in the building, they don't just run over the instruments. They exit the same way. Like, we practice those routines so much that it's just ingrained in them.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of classroom management I've had a lot of teachers ask me questions about this, and I'm sure you have as well, where it's not, yes, teach procedures, but a lot of teachers, I feel like when you're struggling with classroom management, a lot of it is by just doing. And I feel like the simple phrases, like you were talking, the mallets rest, and watching you do what the expectations are. But procedures is not just something you do at the very beginning of the school year, which is so ingrained in us in college, I feel, but it's all throughout the year. You keep practicing, keep reinforcing, and I feel like that's really important, especially with the instruments, is them knowing the expectations and then you following through, like, okay, you played when I told you not to, so I'm sorry, you got to lose your mallets today.
Absolutely. Yeah. In the classes that struggle with it, I even call them out on it. I said, have my expectations changed since kindergarten? No. Okay. So what is changing here? Oh, it's really just my, their willingness to follow those expectations. So I do have some classes where they don't get to be on the xylophones more, they don't get to be on the xylophones as much as some of the other classes get to, because they can't follow those expectations. And I always tell them, at least with the xylophones, they are a privilege. They are not a right. Most schools don't have this nice of set of xylophones.
Yeah, I feel like, and classroom management is going to sometimes be different for each class. And you have to change up what you do for one class. Like if you have 2 4th grade classes, you're not going to be able to do the same kind of classroom management with both classes. And I feel like a lot of teachers need to hear that, because that's okay. You're going to always have classes you struggle with, and it's not you.
You're going to have different personalities and different mixtures of personalities, different teachers with different classroom management styles. And that when you only see your classes once or twice a week, that really makes a difference, in your classroom and how you manage those students as well.
That's good. Well, Erin, this conversation has been great. And so I like to close out each episode by asking, and this is kind of a loaded question, if you have more than one piece of advice, go for it. But what's one piece of advice you wish someone had told you before you started teaching elementary music?
Don't be afraid to try new things. For me, when I was student teaching, I did middle school band and I did elementary music, and I knew for middle school band, like, I'm an oboe player, brass is brass? No. So like that year I forced myself to play mellophone in the marching band instead of saxophone. And when I was in my middle school placement, I would get out a different brass instrument every day, usually the trombone. You don't want to see me play tuba, that's just bad. But I'm really short. I can't handle the tuba.
Yeah, no.
But like, just push yourself out of your comfort zone. If folk dancing is what really intimidates you, find a local college that's doing a folk dancing night and just go.
That's good.
Just kind of immerse yourself into something different. For me,
yeah.
I've immersed myself into the Orff-Schulwerk world. I've taken my 3 levels. Next summer, I'm planning on doing the instructional or the curriculum course. But at the same time, like, I do want to take a Gordon or Kodai level at some point and just immerse myself in something different and kind of make my brain operate and change a little differently and see how I can use that in my classroom. Will it put me out of my comfort zone? Oh, yes, but that's okay. Like I said earlier, your best teachers are the teachers that are good students. We're always constantly learning.
I love that so much. Yeah, don't be afraid to keep learning. Just because now you have your degree or you've been in the classroom for several years does not mean you stop learning.
No.
Yes.
It is a constant process, because if you stop learning, schools and kids are going to change with or without you.
Mm-hmm.
The teachers in our district that have been teaching, 30, 40 years, when they first started, schools looked way different.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of the student population, in terms of technology and the resources available. So if we stop learning, schools are going to leave us behind.
That's good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
you being on here. And I know everybody that's listening to this is going to get so much insight today. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for listening in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, I would love for you to review the show and leave a rating on iTunes. To find out more about how I can help you gain momentum in your elementary music teaching career, head to thedomesticmusician.com, where you'll find free downloads, courses, the blog, and so much more. Continue teaching music and never doubt the impact you're making each and every day in the lives of your students.